Hi there, this is Helen Thomas on the CDFM study group. I'm continuing to review CDFM Module 2, Competency 3, Strategic Planning and Organizational Performance Management. So once Congress have executed the funds, they have appropriated the funds, then we go into the execution phase. And part of the execution phase is the management of those funds, the effective management. So that's where you come in with your internal control. This is where you come in with your auditing transactions once you get those funds. So we often try to effectively and efficiently utilize the limited resources that we are given, the taxpayers' dollars. So this is more like business process improvement, Lean Six Sigma. You're going to see some of these things we want to get more bang for our dollars. So we want to have those effective operations and performances, processes in place to do that. So on page 236 is where you have the definition of business process re-engineering, also called the business process innovation. So think of, again, efficiency whenever you're doing this topic. A radical redesign of the way we do business in order to fundamentally utilize the resources in an effective manner. So you can read through all of that on page 6. You have the steps on page 7, creating the framework. You need to know what the problem is, what you're trying to solve, and you create the framework and objectives to do that. So on page 238, you want to know, what does a re-engineering team look like? So normally whenever you have the Lean Six Sigma or you have a team that's doing the efficiency test, you want to pull a group of subject matter experts together so that they can help provide recommendation in how we can do business better. So that's your re-engineering team. So a couple of things here in your re-engineering team composition. It tells you should keep it 10 members or less. You don't want a huge team because it causes more confusion. If you have an older study guide, older than 2020, then you probably do not have the last paragraph, which is in the 2020 book, what that structure looks like. Team composition. Whenever you put a group of individuals together, there are several stages that team goes through. And if you Google the team development stage, these will come up. We're talking forming, storming, performing, and norming. So you need to know what these words mean. Because if you see it in a scenario, they'll say, okay, you just started a new job, you become a new member of the team, and when you get to your job, they give you the rules and regulation policies of that job. Which stage of team development are you in? Once you understand the definition of forming, storming, performing, norming, then you'll know you're in the forming stage. Because in the forming stage, when you pull a team together, then you establish the goals. You establish the rules of that group, of that team. Whenever you go to a military school, they typically put you in group exercises. You have to establish the rules, ensuring that you respect each other's responses. Don't be rude. Just different things. Whatever the rules are, establish the goals. Storming. Whenever you first put a group of people together, everybody have different capabilities. So until you designate positions, you're going to have that storming. If you just say, hey, you guys are on the team to improve timeliness. Like, okay, well, if you have strong and it typically does, you have individual with strong personalities, or they feel that they're a subject matter expert in a particular area, they have strong opinions, then you have that storming phase, that conflict that comes into play. But ideally, once you stay in the group, then you want to normalize the group. So you want to establish who's in charge, who's responsible for what, so that you can get to the point where you can perform the mission. right? So I want to make sure I keep this in order. Hold on. Yeah. So norming. So form, let me underline form, storm, norming. Norming is when everybody have their assigned roles and responsibilities. You have your suspenses. And then performing is when you actually go and do the task required of your role and then bring it back to the group so that we can have an effective group and success at the end, high levels of success. So make sure re-engineering team, 10 members or less, you go through the 4 stages: form, storm, norm, perform, FSNP. On page 239, it goes into the definitions of Sigma and then Lean Six Sigma. So Sigma is a quality control method developed by Motorola, second sentence, to reduce inefficiencies or defects in our production. Whatever it is we're doing, we want to reduce the level of errors. So Six Sigma is the process we use to reduce inefficiencies. Lean Six Sigma is the added step to prevent waste. Not prevent, reduce it, because it's kind of hard to prevent completely. Reduce waste, defects, and general mistake. General things that we typically should avoid, but because we don't have these procedures in place, we're making simple mistakes. So those are things we can capture. So Lean Six Sigma versus Six Sigma. You have the 5 steps in the Six Sigma process: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. That's listed at the bottom of page 239. With any evaluation, you have to start somewhere, and that starting point is considered your benchmark. So what you do to benchmark is you find an organization, a group that we consider to be the subject matter expert, the best in class is the term used, best practices. They're doing good because they're doing these steps. And then benchmarking is then rating yourself against the best in class. So that's benchmarking on page 10. On page 2311, we're still talking about strategic planning and organizational performance management, is the GPRA of 1993. That was the original law that says the federal government must be accountable for achieving certain results. You can't just get taxpayers' dollars, do whatever you want, don't have to account for it. So accountability, initiate program performance standards. So you can read through all of those. And then in 2010, they modernized that 93 law. You have the GPRA Modernization Act of 2010. So it gave more specific things that the federal government has to do to be able to sustain and to answer for the resources that we have. So performance management. On page 13, a part of that modernization law that they did in 2010, it required a strategic plan for each agency. Education, Department of Defense, Department of State, every agency must have a strategic plan in place that typically covers, when you read through that paragraph, every 4 years. So you ask yourself, well, what is the DoD strategic plan? All right, so my question was, what is the DoD's strategic plan called? Think about it. The National Defense Strategy. That is the DoD strategic plan. So I'm going to put it in my notes. The National Defense Strategies is DoD. So that's how they satisfy the GPRA of 2010. Strategic plan must include mission statement, strategic goal, performance goal, federal priority goals. Awesome. All right. So annually, organizations, agencies must submit an annual performance plan. And then once you give your plan, then throughout the year, you also have to give an annual performance report at the end of that fiscal year. And then the next page, I'll show you what DOD does. Again, this is a DOD exam, so we want to know what responsibilities the DOD have. So your plan is where you detail how you plan to spend the money, where you plan to invest, and so forth. So when you read through that, we have objectives, they're measurable, they're quantifiable, they're cost as an independent variable. I can put a cost on it. And then the annual performance report. So you need to know the differences. Annual performance report. And when you read through, it says the term annual performance report means the same as the performance section of the performance and accountability report published by agencies. So each agency is required to submit a PAR, performance and accountability report, in November, and the annual performance report is submitted in February. So what I'm going to do is go over to page 16, 2316 at the bottom, where you can see what the DOD's responsibility is to the PAR. So in November, when everybody else is submitting their performance and accountability report, the DOD is submitting an agency financial report, which includes annual statement of assurance, which we're familiar with, and financial statements. So remember in module 3, when you talk about the 3 financial statements, the balance sheet, statement of net cost, statement of change in net positions. All right, so those are your financial statements. It's submitted to OMB and Congress by 15 November. And then the annual performance report is submitted to OMB and Congress by 15 February. So you have 15 November for your statement of assurance and your financial statement, and then the annual performance statement is submitted 15 February. And it tells you where it's posted. All right, so establish common vocabulary, message, straightforward. Everything you have. Table 231 talks about different terms and definition. Always make sure you review those, that you know the difference between an outcome and an output. Outcome is the result of certain action, and then the output is A plus B equals C. That's your output. So outcome assessment of the qualitative, right, results of a program, versus output, anything produced by an organization that can be tabulated. So that tells me that is quantitative, or sometimes it can be qualitative. Your output can be qualitative, but for the most part, it's quantifiable. On page 18, 19, and I think 20, yeah, it talks about miscellaneous sources of funds. So remember, most of the funds are appropriated or non-appropriated, NAF. And so you can say that miscellaneous sources of funds are NAF funds. But what type? Just remember that any agency that holds funding, charges a customer for that use of a service, they have to have the statutory authority to keep the funds. If they do not have the statutory authority, on the first paragraph on page 18 to 318, it tells you the funds will have to be returned to the miscellaneous receipts account of the Treasury. For example, a soldier has a helmet. They've been issued TA-50. They've been issued from the central facility. They lose that helmet. They have to pay for it. So you do a cash collection voucher, you go to the finance office, they pay for the item, and guess what? The item is removed from that unit property book. But they do not get to keep the money that the soldier paid because they do not have the statutory authority to keep those funds. Funds have to be removed. So the funds does not go back into that installation. It does not go back into that CIF or that organization that lost the fund equipment. So you lose accountability. So some agencies have agriculture and grazing leases. So each one of these, you need to look and see what the guidelines are. Agriculture and grazing, meaning they charge agencies, organizations to lease land to where they can farm and do certain things. And then whatever they collect for the leases, it tells you they can use for the management, habitat improvement, erosion, different things that they are required to use those funding for. Recycling, since a lot of installations have a recycling program, if they have a designated recycling program, there are some restrictions. So I did notice that in the 2020 book, the amount that the agency can keep went up. It used to be 2 million in the 2018 book. Now the 2019 book says, the last paragraph where it starts with proceeds from the sale of recycle. So you go and recycle, you get a fund, MWR goes back into your organization, the installation gets to keep the majority of those funds. It says if the balance available to a military installation under the section at the end of any fiscal year is more than 10 million, 10 0 0 0 0 0 0, that's 10 million, the amount of the excess shall be deposited into the miscellaneous receipts account of the Treasury, which is good because, like I said, it used to only be 2 million. But now in the recycling program, because they want to promote recycling, is now the agency, if they can raise up to $10 million and keep it for the use of that recycling program and to improve things on the installation, they can use it for that. So make sure recycling you read, because there's a lot of like 50%, they may be used and at the installation for projects dealing with pollution, energy conservation, occupational safety. It gives you different examples of what those funds can be used for. Sale and outlease easements, fish and wildlife, that's another big area, right? Where if you want to go fishing on the installation, hunting, shooting, a shooting range, they charge you a fee for a permit. So the fee that they charge, and actually, what does this sound like? Think about it. I take my fund, I'm an organization on the installation. I take my funds and I beautify the land, I take care of the safety issues, and then based on what it costs me for the upkeep, I charge the customer a fee or a price for them to use the services. The customer pays that for that services, and then I take the funds that the customer gives me and then I put it back into the business. That's the revolving fund process, right? Such as the working capital fund is the same kind of process. Is we don't get new money from Congress every year. Whatever we allow to charge the customer based on what it costs us to do the work, we have that revolving fund process. And what's the goal of the working capital fund, revolving fund? The goal is to break even. So if they charge a certain price this year and at the end of the year when they run their numbers, they appear to have a profit, that means the cost needs to be lower the following year. So that's why even when you go to the commissary this year, your food items might cost one thing, and then when you go the following year, it'll cost either higher or lower, because based on what it costs them, if they're in a hole at the end of the year, that means you can guarantee the following year they're going to raise the prices. All right, so let's see what else. So fish and wildlife, they have the ability, if you close an installation on the BRAC, base realignment, and there were funding left in their fish and wildlife program, it's saying that they can transfer those fees, those funds, to another installation to be used for the same purpose. Energy savings at military installation, energy efficient versus water efficient maintenance. Again, we're looking for ways to save money, be efficient. That's what this whole section is about, being efficient. So on page 21, when it says changing defense business practices, we're doing Lean Six Sigma, we're a white belt, we're a black belt, because We want to be flexible. That's the one term that jumps out at me in this section, is to provide the flexibility to spend the money wisely. And finally, on page 2322, when it comes to saving money, being efficient, we have to also look at sometimes it's not efficient or effective for the government to maintain responsibility. Maybe the government needs the soldiers off the gate to deploy because we have a war going on. So we have to outsource or we have to privatize, like on-post housing. For those were in the military a few years ago, the government, the DOD, used to control all of these housing offices on the post. But now it privatized a few years ago. So what's the difference? Outsource means the government still maintains full responsibility for everything that's right or everything that's wrong in that agency. When you privatize, that responsibility is removed from the government and all responsibility falls on that contractor. So they give you some examples. Privatization went to family housing and utilities, paying the bills on the installation. Usually we used to live on post. We didn't worry about the electricity we burned. It was like, hey, I ain't paying for it. Ain't coming out my BAH, right? It's BAH, but you didn't see it. You didn't think about it. Versus once it's privatized, it's like, what? You get a utility bill, meaning you spending more than everybody else around you. It's going to make you think twice. Hey, maybe I need to turn that light off if I live on post. So privatization versus outsourcing. All right, so this concludes CDFM Module 2, Competency 3, Strategic Planning and Organizational Performance Management. Be sure to click like, share, subscribe, so that you can get the updates, because I do order the new books as they come out. This is just something I enjoy doing. Most people don't. So I do stay on top of what's new out there. So ensure that you please subscribe, get my numbers up, and share with others, because the reason I do what I do is to let people know that it is attainable. You don't have to be defeated before you even get started. So thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you guys again next time. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM Study Group.